Hello and welcome to another update. In this one, I'll be updating on the Kherson front line, and then I'll be analyzing the whole front line as there's been a lot of news in the other places. Starting out here in the Kherson front line, we see that the Ukrainians are now probing around Sedok villages in Kucherske and Borosenske, somewhere around here, as they are testing out the Russian defenses everywhere. They have previously attacked Bruskinsky, as well as Milove and Savlublivka, Luciani, and Sukhanove. So all of these areas they have tested, and now they're testing here in the center. They have also tested Byantakhytki, and here in the south they've tested Bravdine and other areas as well. So the Ukrainians are now continuing their tests and securing that they are attacking from the weakest spot. At the same time, they're still gathering more forces, so it's going to be interesting to see how and where they'll be attacking from, depending on where the weak link was. And before I move on to the rest of the front line, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Let me introduce you to today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN is a virtual private network you can use for a multitude of things, including bypassing geographical limitations on YouTube, getting access to different libraries on Netflix to watch movies that aren't available in your country. You can also use it on all platforms and unlimited devices, regardless of where you live or where you want to go. It masks your IP address to keep you hidden from the websites you visit, and it's very easy to use. Just download it as an app or browser extension and connect. Get it now for 83% off a 2-year-long period and 3 months extra free of charge. If you're in doubt, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So click on the link in the description and use the code WUWU today. Thank you Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Now, moving on to the other front lines, we can start here in the Zaporizhia front. The Ukrainians are continuing their build-up. They have sent reinforcements to the city of Orikhiv as well, and there's a lot of scouting groups here in Malavnika, so they are going to be scouting this front line here in the eastern part, which is most likely with an intention of going towards Mariupol, as there's no reason for them to be scouting this area unless they are either going towards Mariupol or that they want to see if there is any rapid response forces that will help the Russian forces here around Melitopol in case they started an offensive here in the area. So the Ukrainians are continuing with the build-up here in the Zaporizhia front. Other than that, there is not much other news. Moving on to the Kharkiv region, we see that the Ukrainians are gathering a lot of forces here in the Kharkiv region as well. I think they are preparing for a possible incursion by the Russians again here after their mobilization. We see that they are still building their fortifications, which they started with as soon as they retook this area from the Russians back in September. This means that it is now over a month in the making, and they have continued doing so here in this whole northern area by the border region. So they are prepared this time for a Russian incursion, unlike what they did last time. And as for the northern region, we see that the Ukrainians are sending troops to all regions, including Chernihiv, the northern area here in the east, Korosten, Cerny, and Kovel. The reason why they're sending them to these cities is because they need to have some kind of central hub for their forces in each region, and that is to have a rapid response force. They don't know where the Russians will attack from, or if they'll even attack from this northern region. But what they do know is that if they attack, they need to be able to respond quickly, because the further in they go, the less fortifications that they've prepared they can make use of. That's why they've spread them across the border like this, as it will allow them to respond at a very quick pace, and then they can retrieve reinforcements from the other regions as soon as they know where the Russians will attack from. With this, they are prepared on the whole front line, and they will be able to confront the Russian forces once they engage in combat across this border region. The Ukrainians have mentioned that they expect the Russians to attack here by the border region to try and cut off the supplies that the West is sending to Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainians are also building fortifications here in the whole northern region. They're doing it bit by bit, but they have been working on it since the start of the war, since the Russians first left the Kiev area. They focused mainly on Kiev and the surrounding region here, but they are now also building on this front line here, as this is the most significant one. As I mentioned earlier, the Ukrainians are expecting some kind of offensive by the Russians to try and cut off the Ukrainian supply lines from the west, which means that the Russians will try to attack here in this western region, which is why the Ukrainians are building up fortifications here. On this front line, the Russian forces have actually been doing a lot of drone reconnaissance, which has been noticed by Ukrainian forces. The drone activity here in the Chernihiv region have identified multiple Ukrainian ambush positions, which means that the Ukrainians are here preparing for an incursion by the Russian forces, and they're doing that by setting up ambush positions, as well as preparing combat positions for a possible incursion, which means that they are preparing the soldiers and setting up positions and are now sitting in a ready position. This is because what is expected is for the Russians to start their invasion by the 1st of November. Now, why is that date important? Because according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Russian mobilization will be finished by then, which means that they have their 222,000 mobilized forces ready by that time, but also that they'll be in their ready positions. On top of that, we see that the US election on the 7th of November may have an influence on how this war is going to be fought over the next couple of weeks. If Ukraine gets a big victory, then that would be beneficial for Joe Biden in his midterm election. And if the Ukrainians suffer a huge loss due to the Russians, then that would be detrimental for Joe Biden in this midterm election. We have seen that the Republicans have gone out and announced that if they win a majority in the Congress, they will block any free sending of weapons to Ukraine, which mostly means that they will be still sending weapons, but they'll be at the cost of a loan. But with the current state of the Ukrainian economy, that will be difficult for them to pay up for, which means that the weapon sendings will be decreased and they will not receive as they've been receiving so far due to Joe Biden being very supportive of Ukraine. This means that the Russians will win from a big victory in the next couple of weeks, and the Ukrainians will win for a big victory in the next couple of weeks, which is why we see the Russians still standing their ground in Kherson instead of retreating. That is because they want to, at the very least, wait until after the midterm elections, and this is why we see them possibly opening up another front, as it'll allow them to come and say, we're actually making a difference, we're not holding this stable front line. And that's going to be all for this video. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.